Well, I'm really, really honored to be talking with Ericka and Jamila. Erica's actually one of my authors. And Jamila, I've been a long time fan of your writing, your culture criticism. And so really excited to get into a conversation about pleasure principles. I would love to really just start and ask you both, what were you hoping to disrupt when you wrote both of these books? And then what did you want the reader to get from the final page? I'll let you start, Erica.
The final page?
What were you hoping to disrupt? What conversation? And what do you hope a reader walks away with on that final page?
Okay, on the final page. No pressure that I have to have this conversation with my editor, okay? It's no pressure at all. I was hoping to disrupt a conversation around pleasure that would be separate from a discussion on systems of oppression. So this idea that we can have pleasure without actually having a conversation about how capitalism directly impacts that, or how transphobia directly impacts that, homophobia, anti-black racism, when so much of sex has been essentially really forwarded through a very violent structure, right? And even with that, how do we then relate to ourselves and our bodies? So I was hoping to disrupt this conversation that pleasure could ever be apolitical. And then what I hope for the reader to get on that final page, I hope that they walk away understanding that profoundly, that you cannot have a pleasurable existence, pleasurable experience without actually looking at how systems are directly impacting that reality. And what is the internal work that's necessary? Because I think it's not necessarily easy to look at systems outside of you and look at the bigger picture, but I think it takes a bit more labor to look at yourself and to see how you are forwarding those systems in some way, shape, or form.
So when I sat down to write my book, I wanted to defend Black single mothers. I wanted to celebrate Black single mothers. I wanted to change the narrative about what I thought to be a very important group of people in our community. Since having published the book and traveled the country with the book and had a lot of conversations with people about the book, I am more radicalized. I am now convinced that Black single mothers are superior beings to most others.
Amen.
I think that Black single mothers are the single most important group of people in the Black community, and that we would fall apart without us. So what I want people to walk away from with this book, and I hope that one day it lives a life where I get to write an anniversary edition, I can add some of these more radical thoughts. But what I want for people to take from the first iteration of Black single mother is that Black single mothers deserve more.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Honestly, as I sit here, I'm kind of thinking about both of you guys' writing and even my own story. I'm like, I'm a product of a queer father and a Black single mother. And I'm like, you were saying backstage that not enough people think about Black single mothers and their experience with pleasure. And you write in your book that like we question what's normal and like what we can believe to be normal, what's normal in our sex pleasure, what's normal, or who gets to be desired. And it's normally not the disabled community, it's normally not the queer community, it's normally not Black single mothers. Like, how do we change that tide some? How do we say, like, actually, Black single mothers deserved pleasure, and this is how we get to those pleasure principles in our own lives? And then for the queer community, or disabled community, all the communities you write about, like how do we get to saying we can center pleasure more? And I think it's a lot of decolonization work in both of you guys' stories, but what's the way we even start this?
Yeah, I think it's intentional. It's being intentional about naming the thing, right? So I've been a Black single mother in public for 13 years. I've shared my experiences, my ups and downs, my co-parenting journey with the world in hopes that me navigating these things and dealing with these complications in front of other people would help other people, particularly other Black single mothers, on their journey. And I've been very intentional about, I am the CEO of Mama Gotta Have a Life Too. Okay? I have always prioritized my pleasure. I have always prioritized my personhood in my motherhood journey. I did not have to sacrifice everything to mother, even as a single mother. And I think it's important that we remind ourselves of that and that we do what we need to do to give ourselves the opportunity to experience pleasure. So I have a co-parent. A lot of single mothers don't. But if there's a single mother in your village who does not have a co-parent, you need to show up for her. You need to say, hey, you need a night out. Let me take the kids. Hey, you've been working really hard. I'm just going to send you some money for DoorDash so you don't have to cook tonight. You have to be a pleasure center for the single mothers in your life.
Thank you. Thank you. Y'all should clap for that. Yeah. I would say for Black, queer, and disabled folks, I think I spent a lot of time questioning my body. When I was diagnosed with bilateral breast cancer, which I write about in the book, I blame myself. I was going to yoga on a regular basis. I was eating all the foods, all the organic things. And I was wondering, like, what did I do wrong for this to be the case? Not actually looking at living in New York City, ingesting, tons of pollution on a regular basis. The fact that our food systems are literal trash, right? Like, I wasn't looking at anything. The world was telling me to only look at myself, to only critique myself, right? Why weren't people desiring me? What was wrong with me? Why wasn't I fitting into some sort of image that everybody wanted to be with? So in writing Nasty Work, it was important for me to reveal the nasty part of what gets in the way oftentimes, which is fat phobia, ableism, colonialism, right? These notions that have been around for longer than all of us, that have really set the standard to say, you're supposed to hate yourself, right? You're supposed to blame yourself for having to even navigate the medical industrial complex. You're supposed to blame yourself for a literal diagnosis of cancer, right? And make yourself essentially stressed out, which is one of the number one killers, instead of looking at these systems and really pushing up against those systems and having pleasure inside of that. Like, it really brought me great pleasure reading books like Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington and really seeing the literal roots of medical apartheid to say, oh, it's not actually me, right? Like, there's a whole structure that's out to essentially kill us, right? It's never that a system will just have one weapon. There's multiple weapons. So being able to call out what those weapons are and name them, I think, is incredibly powerful and also brings great pleasure.
No, as you said that, I thought about your book, Jamila, and just like, it's also a system to break down Black single motherhood and the Black family from eons ago of what that meant and what that looked like. Let's go to like your books and on the page. Both your books are very, very personal, but they both have research, analytics. You bring in other voice. Jamila, you bring in over 20 other Black single mothers. For you, you have other queer community, other disabled, even how you were brought up. How did you decide what you would actually put on the page, what was worth it to keep, and what did you need to just get your message across? Why did you bring other women to the page? And for you, how did you know what stories to tell?
So the book I sold to Penguin is not the book I turned in. I wanted to talk to experts. I wanted to talk to Kimberly Crenshaw, who's over there. I wanted to, do a lot of research and get into the weeds of why Black single mothers are treated the way they are. I did not intend to talk much about my experience as a child of a single mother, nor being a single mother myself. But when it came time for me to sit down and write, I felt that there was no better way for me to open that conversation than to start with my own experiences. And I feel that there are parts of my story, my parents' journey, my mother's relationship with my father, my own experience with my child's father and stepmother, that are relatable and common and that people will resonate with. But I also recognize very quickly that are part of my journey, that parts of my journey are very privileged, right? Like, I'm a college-educated, able-bodied, light-skinned woman who's the mother to a little light-skinned daughter, right? So even without a ring, did we get treated shady? Absolutely. Did we get treated the way my friend Tanya Fields, who has 5 children in the Bronx, how they showed up as a beautiful dark-skinned family of 6? No, absolutely not. 6 children, excuse me. So I wanted to make sure that while including my own voice, I was talking to other Black single mothers and talking to a diverse set of experiences. One of my beautiful mothers, Tamika Anderson, is here. We were pregnant at the same time. She is a connector of people. Single motherhood propelled her into her best and most fully realized self. And that's something that I realized so many of us had in common. So whether we had a co-parent or not, Whether we had multiple children, whether we were low income, high income, college trained or not, single motherhood led us into finding the best version of ourselves. And I wanted to reflect that to the world and remind people that we are not simply heads of households, we are heads of state in the Black community.
Yeah.
I said there was a lot of pressure that my editor is sitting right here, right? I already said that. And the question was, well, why did you want to speak about your personal life, or how did you know to bring that to the page? Well, my editor told me to bring it to the page. We are. And I didn't know that you had a queer daddy, so you didn't tell me all your personal stuff, but anyway, as a sex educator, we're trained, especially with working with young people, that you don't talk about yourself, right? You're working with kids from kindergarten all the way up to the collegiate level. You leave yourself outside of the room. So when I would turn in my pages, it was pages and pages of citation from other people's work, citing like what other people have said about systems of oppression and how it directly impacts sex and pleasure. And Chelsea would come back to me and say, well, this is great, but where does Ericka fit into this? And I say, I don't know. Like, I'm a virgin. Like, I don't know. I don't know anything. That was supposed to be a joke, y'all. That's supposed to be a joke. I'm not a virgin. Okay. Like,
Talking about sex.
We're talking about sex. Can everybody say sex? Louder. Louder. They're still scared. They're scared at Essence. They're scared.
I don't know what y'all usually do at Essence Fest.
Yeah, okay. But I had to look at how I was putting myself in this conversation, right? I was not born with my fist in the air. I've had to navigate lots of different scenarios where I questioned myself, I questioned the world, and I even questioned my own identity, right? I had spent a lot of time as a queer person thinking that my queerness was inside of or created because I was assaulted as a kid, right? Or I thought my queerness was something that was just going to be sexual, that it wasn't something that was actually real and deserving of a relationship or something that was long term. I thought it was something that was just temporary. So actually being able to talk about that and talking about my first relationship and talking about some of the images that really colored my queerness, like watching the 30-second clip of Queen Latifah and Set It Off with her girlfriend, right? Or watching The Color Purple and seeing Celie kiss Suge and being like, more, right? Like, I even felt like we just honored Lauryn Hill at BET, and even Lauryn Hill and Tanya Blout, like I played that scene over and over again, mostly because I love His Eyes on the Sparrow, but also it felt so intimate to me, right? It felt so incredible. Like as a kid, I'm like, can I have that? But is it wrong because I have no examples of that, right? So really talking about and exposing how impactful that is to young people, and young people actually having those examples that queerness is real, right, is so rooted in a long history of queerophobia. Mm-hmm.
I mean, we had everyone scream sex, but we know like pleasure is so much, and you both talk about this, so much deeper than the physical. And I think we're living in a time where like pleasure feels hard to access. Like the news is rough, the reality of this world is rough. In this space feels really safe and really joyful, but like how do we take that when we leave this space? How do you create pleasure beyond, like we're talking about touch and whatnot and sex, but like what do we need to do to say I can center pleasure in the reality of the world we live in right now? Like how are you guys doing it in your real life? And then how do you think Black single mothers need to do it and need to think about it? And you talked about community, like go show up for them, but what do you say, like how do we take it beyond this moment?
I don't know. I think I'm on antidepressants.
Shout out.
So that's one way that I keep it.
100%.
But also, I've created a world for me that is so Black and so beautiful, and I surround myself with people and things that I care about, and I do work that is meaningful to me, and that is not always easy when you're trying to survive capitalism and white supremacy. But I think it's a matter of finding the joy where you can. I know that sounds cliche, but it could simply be having a box of your favorite tea every week. Right, you know that no matter what goes wrong, you can always get that tea because it's $4, and no matter what, you're gonna figure out a way to have that $4 for that tea. If it just little things that you can do for yourself. And I think for me, one of the greatest joys of my life is being in community with other Black women. So like coming here once a year, and I live in LA now, so it's different. It's real different. Like it's so nice to be surrounded with this much beautiful, loving, supportive Black womanhood. And I think wherever you can find that, it might be in the pages of a book, it might be on the internet, you know, and if you're fortunate, it's in person in the company of actual Black women. But finding that love, I think, helps us as Black women stay centered.
Of course, of course. I echo those sentiments, and being in community with Black, queer, disabled, and trans folks has 100% saved me. I look to the ballroom community as a space of just a complete freedom and living up against and pushing up against all of the odds. I think also, I just recently went to a breast cancer camp, and I was surrounded by so many people that have had breast cancer, and it was really, really amazing to just be able to talk to them about their experiences and not have to explain anything, right? There's just this knowing that was so enjoyable and wonderful. I also am a massive lover of trash television. So I love Love Island, Married at First Sight, all of it that would truly stress anybody out, but I sit and I analyze it, and that brings me a great deal of joy, right? To see what cis heterosexual people are doing and they're up to is something that is just, it's incredibly pleasurable.
So much entertainment.
Yes.
So much entertainment. I feel like I'm hearing this conversation around community, around how do you build practices into your day for pleasure. Is there anything that we really haven't touched upon that like you guys use in your own life that like I keep pleasure center? I'm thinking about the conversation being called pleasure principles. Is there a principle you live by that gives you more pleasure?
And vendors, for you to close shop, the time is now.
They're kicking us out.
Last question.
But I would say a pleasure principle that I live by is masturbation 100%. I think I grew up with a great deal of stigma around masturbation, that I'm constantly thinking about, you know, the ways that we push up against this idea that it has to be, pleasure has to come from someone else, right? And that's when you'll be able to experience pleasure or be able to be in your body, but to be able to do that for yourself whenever it makes sense, whenever it feels right, I think is incredibly powerful for however long, right? It doesn't have to be a foreplay conversation for someone else to come, but I think there's this, in masturbation, there's a great deal of resistance to like compulsory relationships or romance, and I think it's great to resist that in the process of enjoying your body.
I think for me, just putting a priority on pleasure is my pleasure principle. Like I seek pleasure out as much as I can, right? No matter what I have going on economically, professionally, in terms of my family, I want that good cup of coffee. I want to only eat food that I like. I only want to be around people that I care about. You know, I don't subject myself to things that make me miserable. Like I try to be as pleased as I possibly can, considering the state of the world that we're in.
Thank you both. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank
Clap
you.
for both of them. I think we're going to do some signings and sell some books right over here. So if you want to get in line for a book, please do that.
Thank y'all.